What's up YouTube, this is Lucas with Foxhawk Gaming. Today we're going to be talking about incentive in video games and in particular Fortnite. So I was playing Fortnite the other day and I thought to myself, this gameplay is very fun at its core, but how does the game manage to have fun gameplay yet lose my attention so quickly, as well as others from what I've read of their opinions on the game? And the answer I came up with is it goes to why we play video games in the first place, and in particular why we do anything in the first place, and that is incentive. So the player wants to get the best bang for their investments in the game. This not only includes money, but it also includes time investment, and that is what I'm going to focus on. Essentially, the time investment is the player spends X amount of time on the game. What do they see for it? A lot of times in games, since they've hit the mainstream, we've seen this in new levels, story advancement, character empowerment, new items, and even very high skill caps have held the interest of players in continuing to reward them for when they put their time into a game. So Fortnite's progression system is built around character empowerment, and that's what we're going to be looking into. The first mode of character empowerment we're going to be looking at in Fortnite are the skill trees, which include both the research skill tree as well as the experience-based skill tree. The research tree is time-gated and capped on your pool. So what this means is you gain a certain amount of research points per hour since you last collected, and this goes up to a maximum amount before you stop earning them and you have to collect them. Now, this does not have any bearing on playing the game, so it is a time gate. It is supposed to incentivize you logging in every day, which overall can be an effective tool of incentive when it comes to playing the game. However, it's very dependent upon the rest of the game feeling rewarding for the player to tolerate this lack of control. Now, in contrast, we have the traditional skill tree, which after every mission you gain a certain amount of experience, and after you level up your account a level, then you get to get skill tree points, in which you can spend it on stat upgrades, survivor slots, and even in-game skills. Now, the effectiveness of this is it's decent. It rewards you for playing the game with progression. That's about the depth of the traditional skill tree, though. You aren't really rewarded for particular builds because the game is kind of designed for you to eventually pick up every point in the tree. So there's not much creativity, but you are rewarded for playing the game, and that is what we will acknowledge. Next, we're going to talk about the in-game loot. What I say when I refer to in-game loot in Fortnite is the bulk of what we receive for playing and completing missions. Now, by far and large, most of this loot is crafting and building materials, so that you can replace guns that have no durability left, so that you can create ammo, and building materials for your bases so that you can complete the objectives. Now, overall, this incentive is fairly weak on the effectiveness side, because most of what you're getting in the game is just what you're using, and so you kind of enter this loop of, well, why really am I playing missions if I'm just recouping part of the losses that I spent completing them? Now, this is most of what you receive in the game. There are also experience tokens that you can receive for completing missions, and these are used to upgrade your progression items, such as survivors and heroes. Now, this is not the only way to gain experience, so overall it's a fairly okay incentive, but as far as endgame loot goes, raindrops and lightning in a bottle are probably the most effective, because you can gain them for a reward for completing a mission at the end, and everyone will receive it. And these are progression item supplements, so the incentive to play missions, if you're going for min-max or in-game in Fortnite, is really high. But if you're having trouble really dropping into the game, getting into it, the raindrops don't do a whole lot until it comes to the point where, to increase your power level, you start needing to upgrade and evolve your survivors for more stats. So overall, Lightning in Bottle and Raindrop are probably the most important in-game reward. However, they're only progression item supplements. Next, we are going to talk about the actual loot in Fortnite. And what I'm referring to when I say the actual loot in Fortnite, I'm referring to the items that contribute the most to our progression, and almost the entirety of it. These are going to be survivors, weapon schematics, and heroes. These are obtained through the RNG loot boxes known as llamas, which can be purchased with the in-game currency V-Bucks. This currency can also be purchased with actual money. Now, after we get past the initial burst of V-Bucks they give you in this game, you end up with a very small and slow trickle of llamas that equates to about one standard llama every 2 days, which is not that much. It's important to note that we can also recycle our survivors, weapon schematics, and heroes, and actually need to do so in order to get certain progression items, such as training manuals, that allows us to upgrade our survivors even further and get through more progression. So when talking about this system through the perspective of incentives, we very obviously can make the conclusion that yes, Epic Games wants to make money, but when we look at it a little bit deeper, we end up asking the question, at what cost does this happen? So we talked earlier that character empowerment is the form of progression in this game. It is what sets apart one player's account from another player's account. It is the measure of how powerful you have gotten, as well as how much content you see with regards to the different weapons you can have and the different heroes you can have. Advancing in the missions doesn't provide this amount of progress because they do not differentiate themselves that much. So the bulk of what we're seeing comes from these llamas that measures the success of a player. So let's assume we caved in and we bought some llamas. When we actually do end up getting our loot, it's a very weird thing because we may realize that the bulk of our progression has come entirely through menus. That there wasn't very much gameplay happening whenever we found the bulk of our power level being increased. So when we look at it this way, the main game is almost a casino simulator itself, and then we have gameplay on the side. It's like this was a centralized gambling simulator with a game added to it the way it is set up. And I measure this by where the main progression comes from. Throwing cash down on llamas provides quite a bit of progression, honestly. And when we look at the conclusion of where Epic Games is trying to lead us with this system, we will look at this incentive that pushes the main game to be progressed through money itself. So now I want to talk a bit about the gameplay and what sort of behaviors are encouraged through the mechanics of the game. I'm going to be talking about a standard random team setup because for a lot of missions, especially ones where you're slightly under the recommended power level, you're going to typically do it with other people, as well as this being the default setting. So most missions, there are some exceptions, revolve around protecting some sort of objective, and a lot of these you can start with the team at your own discretion, and some of them have a time limit which activates them by the end. So with that assumption in play, mission costs generally have 3 costs that are attributed to the individual. This is ammo, gun durability, and building supplies. So a lot of these games, what ends up taking place is a very long harvesting phase for players. And this is because the missions attribute costs to the individual. However, the mission rewards themselves are awarded to the team. So theoretically, if one was min-maxing what they gained by the end of a game, putting in the minimal effort to the objective that you possibly can while maximizing your harvesting phase puts you as an individual at the top, since there are no independent scores that actually attribute to different rewards at the end of the game. So the incentive, purely when looking through mechanics, not considering in social pressure or anything like that, is that you want to contribute the least to the team while still being successful, and you want to maximize what you can gain out of your harvesting phase and gain more. And in a game where you can't solo the objective and you have to depend upon other teammates, this means you can have pretty sluggish games at times where no one really wants to activate the objective because people want to search for chests to recoup their losses on resources, and sometimes you'll see people not even contributing to the main objective, which can be very frustrating. Now, with that, I want to talk about two mission types that I've come across that I think are actually fantastic in this game because they don't suffer from the same problem. The first of which are the Rescue Survivors mission. For one, there is a flat time limit on this, which limits the amount of sluggishness that can be played. And the reward is people, which can be used to transform gray survivors and defenders into blue survivors and defenders. These are the reward for saving more survivors while on this mission. So the main objective is directly tied with how much reward the individual gets. So when people hedge their bets, they want to make sure that they're getting the maximum amount of reward out of this, which means that they're more likely to contribute to the main objective. On top of that, there is no building required, which completely eliminates one of the resources that you need to use for a mission like this. So it's no building required, it's spread out, and it goes along great with the harvesting incentive. I've seen people go save a survivor and destroy a couple cars, go on to the next one, and I think it's the way they have the mechanics set up and what kind of behaviors are encouraged. Saving some survivors, a lot of players consider probably a pretty good deal in this situation. So they'll contribute to the team's actual goals while fulfilling their own individual ones. The other one that I really like are the Destroy Encampment missions. One of the biggest things is that the main objective in here, every time you destroy an encampment, you actually get like a chest worth, essentially, of in-game loot. So most of the time this is going to be building materials, nuts and bolts, gun crafting materials. So you have it all right there. You have building costs, you have gun durability and ammo being provided to you from fulfilling the main objective. On top of that, there is no building required in this mission type. There's a time limit on it, a lot like the survivor missions, and it's spread out, meaning that while people explore, they're finding more of the objectives. And I think it's a lot more reasonable to expect people that are individually trying to make it out the best they can. They see this and an encampment and some of their teammates, and they decide, yes, it's in my best interest to make sure that this encampment gets destroyed. So I think the survivor missions and the encampment missions are the exception to the rules of how I've laid out these gameplays. I think they're fantastic, and I think it pushes randomly organized teams to actually work together on those two unlike the other missions like Protect the Van that end up feeling sluggish, slow, and not a very good team experience. Of course, this positive is also somewhat of a negative that I think really makes Epic Games need to reconsider exactly what the priorities and incentive mechanisms are in their gameplay. Because the most fluid missions, in my opinion, the Destroy Encampments and the Survivors, that also tend to have the most rewards of all the missions, they have zero fort building requirement in them, and do not rely on heavy cooperation, both of those of which are big selling points of this game. So I think whenever entirely getting rid of the building mechanic from a mission makes the gameplay more fluid, I think there's a problem in your fort building shooter game. So let's take a look at what we have all together here now. Going over the incentives we've covered, we have a few incentives put in place in the game to make us want to log in every day or two, such as with the research tree or with the daily quests for our free-to-play llamas. And we have some incentive to play the missions. We get raindrops and lightning in a bottle from some missions every now and then, which allow us to upgrade progression items, so it works as a supplemental progression item, and we get further in the skill tree by playing more, so that's really nice. But by far and large, the central progression of the game is to get stronger heroes, stronger guns, stronger survivors, and then to upgrade them, and this by far and large is done through opening llamas. The game's #1 goal for you to reach the win condition is based entirely almost around opening these things, which makes the game seem like the game itself was almost an afterthought. The gameplay itself is not bad, but as I've said, it has its fair share of problems, including incentivizing very individualistic and selfish plays, not in line with the objective for most missions. Like I said, I think the Encampment and the Survivor missions are set up in such a way that it really influences everyone to help out with the objectives the way they are set up. But again, back to our main form of progression. It's as if this game was built primarily around a casino simulator of sorts with a gameplay added onto it. Overall, I think Fortnite exhibits some very strong core game concepts altogether. However, I do believe these have been pushed to the wayside to make way for this casino llama simulator. And overall, I don't think it's even that rewarding for the people that do invest in it, because the nature of games is that they are to win. The entire point is to progress through. When the only progression is related to how strong you can make your character, the goal, even after you open llamas, is to open more llamas. I really can't see it appealing to very much people looking at the way the incentives are set up, and they're lacking in the play the game more departments. I think this has the most appeal to a gambling addiction of sorts. Anyways, comment, let me know what you think about Fortnite's progression system, about its incentive system, and like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this. I'll see you next time. Bye.